Prologue. Second floor, east end of the barn. Papaw had always claimed the barn had two hearts. One beat downstairs, where the cattle feed and the tractor grease lived in a constant argument. The other beat upstairs, beneath the rafters, where time settled thick like dust and the temperature never seemed to change, no matter the season. He said the upstairs heart kept the memories warm, but the secrets cool. And tucked away at the far east end of that second floor was something that had been waiting 23 years to speak. A 1/5 gallon bottle of Brushy Creek Reserve, laid down on 11/18/2002. Back when phones still flipped, gas was cheap, and optimism had a little more cartilage in its knees. Papaw had placed the bottle there not for aging, he said, but for marination. He believed whiskey learned from the rafters, learned patience, learned silence, learned how to keep its mouth shut until a night arrived that felt right. And tonight, the Friday evening after Thanksgiving 2025, felt right. Not because of anything dramatic, just because enough time had passed, enough years, enough presidents, enough storms, enough funerals, and because the world had reached a kind of wobbling point that made old men nostalgic and sarcastic in the same breath. The bottle came down with a grunt that sounded older than Papaw himself. The dust on it was thick, textured, the kind that doesn't blow off so much as detaches from surfaces like it's tired of holding on. Papaw looked at it like it was a letter that had finally caught up with him. "Well," he said, "might as well hear what it's got to say." His remaining friends, the last 4 out of the old circle, all born around 1940, all somewhere between stubborn and spiritually bulletproof, nodded like they'd been expecting this for years. They were men who had lived through rotary phones, ration stamps, moon landings, and the bicentennial. They were men who still had 1975 stored permanently in their peripheral vision, the year before America turned 200, the year of flag decals, AM radio, in a sense that the nation still had elbow room. Now they were here, in the slow twilight of 2025 America, octogenarians with attitudes sharp enough to cut fence wire and humor dry enough to season cast iron. And they were ready to give their bicentennial-era eyes, their 75 eyes, as Papaw called them, on what the hell had become of the country. Not a sermon, not a lecture, just the truth as only men born in the first Roosevelt administration could tell it. Sarcastic, funny, deep, and a little sad around the edges, like a hymn sung by someone who half remembers the words but knows exactly what they mean. The barn was warm from the day's leftover sunlight. Brushy Creek outside moved with a kind of slow, committed rhythm that suggested if it had ever been young, it had forgotten how to admit it. The cows were tucked somewhere past the fence line, making the occasional sound that could mean hunger or disapproval or just commentary. Papaw handed the bottle around like it was a relic. The cork sighed when he opened it. Not a loud pop, more like a tired exhale, as if the whiskey had been waiting for someone to finally ask how it felt. The first sip traveled through the men like a shared memory. "Huh," said TL, his voice gravelly but amused. "This tastes like 2002, back when hope still had a job." "Back when knees still had cartilage," Virgil added, rubbing his own like he owed it money. Back then, 2002, none of them had imagined what the world would look like in 2025. They hadn't imagined the phones, the politics, the noise, the electricity of everything. They hadn't imagined a future where connection meant tapping glass instead of knocking on a screen door. Papaw sat heavily on the old sofa, a relic from the Carter administration that had somehow remained structurally loyal, and looked at his friends the way a general surveys the last of his troops. "Well, boys," he said, "we might as well get started." The topic wasn't formally stated. It didn't have to be. It hovered in the barn air like humidity, like the smell of hay, like the murmur of Brushy Creek. What happened to America? And what are we supposed to do now? They weren't angry yet. Anger would come later. At the moment, they were in the soft glow of something between nostalgia and reconnaissance. These were men who had lived long enough to see the country reinvent itself more times than a politician's resume. They had seen it stumble, stand up, fall again, and try something new. They had watched it fight itself the way a body fights fever, hot, wild, disoriented, but always trying to burn off whatever virus had crawled in. They knew grief. They also knew comedy. They'd lost friends, lost wives, lost hearing, lost innocence, but never the ability to find humor in the absurdity of existence. They had lived long enough to recognize that America wasn't broken. It was just a work in progress with bad handwriting and a habit of losing its screwdriver. The first round of stories was mild, almost polite. Recollections of the bicentennial, fireworks, parades, the sense that America was on the cusp of something grand, that the next 50 years would be full of moon bases, innovation, decency, courage, and maybe, just maybe, flying cars. Instead, they got hashtags, scandals, conspiracy obsessions, and refrigerators that tried to talk to them. Not to mention roads nobody asked to be turned into labyrinths of poorly explained roundabouts. But underneath the sarcasm was something else, a deeper current, the whisper of a belief none of them could quite give up, the belief that America, beneath the noise, beneath the polarization, beneath the weirdness and the exhaustion, was still worth fighting for. Not violently, not angrily, but through resolve, through decency, through stubbornness, through the kind of quiet moral muscle memory that built barns, raised families, and kept promises. Papaw leaned back, took another sip, and looked at the men who had shared his entire adult life. "Boys," he said, voice low, "we got a long night ahead of us, and I reckon America does too." Brushy Creek outside kept flowing. The barn creaked. The men exhaled together. The bottle had begun to talk, and they were ready to listen. Chapter 1. Denial. We ain't in trouble. We're in a temporary state of remarkable misunderstanding. Denial always starts polite. That's how you can spot it. It's the softest of all the grief phases, dressed up in manners and dipped in honey. On this Friday evening, the barn air still held a little warmth, and the Brushy Creek Reserve had not yet found the lower depths of any man's constitution. So their first instinct, naturally, was to pretend everything was perfectly fine. "Well," Virgil said, stretching his back until he sounded like a cedar splitting, "I don't know what everybody's worried about. America's just recalibrating." T.L. Spit laughed. "Recalibrating? Son, you say that every time your truck won't start." "Same principle," Virgil answered. "Sometimes an engine needs a minute to remember what it is." The rest nodded because that was about as reasonable as anything these days. Denial, for old men, has the structure of science. It sounds logical, even when it is categorically nonsense. Papaw set the Brushy Creek bottle between them like a lantern. "Boys," he said, "I reckon this country ain't any worse than she was. Folks just got better microphones." This was classic Papaw, the belief that nothing new had ever been invented except louder ways to make the same old mistakes. He'd carried that idea since the Kennedy administration, and he wasn't about to abandon it for the algorithms of 2025. "You can't judge a country by her headlines," Sutter said, rubbing his jaw. "That's like judging a hog by the squeal instead of the bacon." Everyone grunted approval. Nothing in the world brought octogenarians into consensus faster than pork-based metaphors. They passed the bottle again. The first true sip of the night always ran slower, like the whiskey was still testing the air, deciding whether this group was worthy of its age and patience. It warmed them, loosened their tongues, and gave rise to the first of many delusions that would shape the evening. "I'll tell you one thing," T.L. said. "America's got spirit. Ain't no doubt about that." "Oh, she's got spirit," Papaw agreed. "She's just temperamental. Always has been." Yeah, like one of them high-strung coonhounds, smart as hell, but liable to eat the couch if you leave her alone too long. This was how denial worked, by comparing America to an animal they loved more than most extended family members. Problems didn't feel so big if you could treat them like training issues. Virgil leaned back in the old metal chair, letting it scream under his weight like it was being interrogated. Far as I can see, ain't nothing wrong with this country that a good rain or a short memory could fix. The others nodded. They liked that one. It had the shape of a proverb, even though it contained no actionable information. Papa adjusted the lamp beside him, throwing a slow amber glow across the barn. Dust motes drifted like tired fireflies. The cows mumbled somewhere in the distance. Brushy Creek whispered its steady, unhurried song. "Listen," Papa said, "you young folks think this is new, all this division, all this fuss. But in '75, hell, folks were just as crazy. Y'all just forgot." Virgil raised his eyebrows. "Pap, you're the only one in this room who ever remembers anything correctly." "That's because I write stuff down," Papa replied, tapping his forehead. "Y'all rely on memory, which is just imagination with arthritis." The men laughed, partly because it was funny, but mostly because they knew it was true. They drifted into stories, light ones at first, shallow recollections of gas lines and bicentennial cakes and flag-themed T-shirts that could ignite if a man walked too close to a charcoal grill. They remembered the optimism of '75, when the whole country painted itself red, white, and blue, as if patriotism could be lacquered on like barn paint. "And we thought we had problems back then," Sutter said. "We didn't have a clue, not a clue in the world." "That's because we were young," Papa replied. "Young folks always think their troubles are deeper than everybody else's. Then time shows up and proves them wrong." This was denial wrapped in wisdom, the belief that age had made them immune to despair. The bottle circled again. "But look here," TL said, wiping the cork with his thumb. "This business now, the phones, the anger, the loudness of everything, it don't scare me." "No, sir," Virgil agreed. "If America ain't dead by now, she's immortal." "That's right," Sutter said. "And hell, if the nation ever gets tired of itself, it'll take a nap and wake up ornery but fine." This was the height of their denial, the conviction that America behaved like they did, that she could be worn out, cranky, or nonsensical, but ultimately reliable, a stubborn old mule of a republic. Papa pointed at the ceiling rafters. "Boys, this country's always been a tornado. We've just gotten better at watching it from every angle. Back then, you saw the storm through one window. Now you see it through 1,000 screens." "Just makes it look bigger," Sutter said. "Yeah, but it ain't stronger." The men fell quiet for a moment, not solemn, just thoughtful. The first part of denial is the story you tell yourself. The second part is the silence where you decide whether to believe it. Papa broke it gently. "I'll say this," he said. "I ain't ashamed of how I was raised, and I ain't ashamed of this country. We've been noisy before. We've been foolish before. We've been mean before, but we ain't ever stayed that way." TL nodded slowly. "Ain't in trouble. We're just in a temporary state of remarkable misunderstanding." That line earned a long round of appreciative mm-hms. The barn creaked. Brushy Creek murmured. Night thickened around them. Denial held, not because they believed. Chapter 2, Anger. "If America had any sense left, it'd be afraid of us old men." The second pour is where truth gets rowdy. Anger isn't subtle. It doesn't creep in like sorrow or ease in like nostalgia. Anger barges through the barn door, boots muddy, shirt untucked, shouting about things that nobody asked it to shout about. And for men born around 1940, anger is just honesty with its sleeves rolled up. The Brushy Creek Reserve hit their bloodstreams like a sermon. The first sip had loosened them, the second sharpened them. Their denial had been gentlemanly, almost poetic. But now the barn lights hummed, the night air cooled, and something electric stirred across the group. the ancient familiar irritation that America had lost its dang mind and refused to tell them why. Virgil was the first to erupt. He slammed his palm on the arm of his chair so hard the dust puffed up like a startled ghost. "I'm telling y'all right now, this whole country went stupid the moment groceries learned how to scold me." Everyone blinked. "Scold you?" Papaw asked. "Scold me," Virgil repeated. "The self-checkout told me to place item in the bagging area like I was some kind of delinquent, like it was my employer. Machine got a tone about it." TL wheezed. "Virgil, that's not the country's fault. That's you arguing with circuitry." "That's the problem," Virgil yelled. "We built a country so fancy we gotta argue with our own appliances. You tell me Reagan saw that coming, huh?" Sutter leaned forward. "Well, I'll say this," he said. "If my coffee pot ever develops an attitude, I'm moving to Canada." They all nodded in violent agreement. This was anger warming up. Papaw, who rarely raised his voice, let out a sound halfway between a cough and a growl. "Boys," he said, "I ain't mad about much, but I am mad about roads." The others tilted their heads. "Roads?" TL repeated. Papaw leaned forward like a man about to confess a crime. "Why in God's peaceful creation are there roundabouts in Ashley County? We ain't London, we ain't Paris, we ain't navigating a flock of imported swans. We're just trying to get to the feed store without feeling like we're being graded." Virgil slapped his knee. Yes, that's what I'm talking about." Sutter pointed at the ceiling. "I saw some poor fellow go around that roundabout 4 times. He looked like he was caught in a low-pressure system." TL nodded solemnly. "Them things don't belong here. You put a circle in a county full of right angles, and folks'll panic." They rumbled with laughter. The anger wasn't cruel, just absurdly righteous. But the whiskey wasn't finished with them. After a long swig, Sutter cleared his throat. "I'm mad," he announced, "that the news don't tell me news anymore. They tell me feelings. I don't want feelings. I want to know why the county line road's washed out again." "Because the county forgot to fix it," Papaw said. "Exactly," Sutter replied. "That's news. But no, they gotta tell me about some celebrity having a nervous breakdown in Malibu. Malibu ain't real. Malibu is mythological." Virgil waved his hand. "I ain't mad at Malibu. I'm mad that nobody taught America how to behave in public. People yelling in airports, fighting in Walmart, wearing pajamas in restaurants. You know what we wore in public when I was a kid? Pants. Pants with buttons, ironed, with dignity." Papaw grunted. "Folks had shame back then." "Shame was a community investment," TL added. "Now shame's a coupon no one uses." The barn erupted in agreement so intense it nearly shook the hay rafters. The bottle made another lap. Outside, autumn crickets offered commentary, chirping in a rhythm that sounded like disapproval, or agreement, hard to tell with crickets. But the tone softened just for a moment when the anger turned inward, not into sadness yet, but into something shaped like loss wearing a disguise. Papaw's voice shifted low. "You know what else makes me mad?" he said. "We used to fix things, not replace them. TVs, radios, relationships, everything now is disposable. Even folks. Can't keep a friend from one election to the next." Nobody interrupted him. When Papaw got this tone, it meant truth had walked into the barn. "When I was young, neighbors didn't care how you voted. They cared if your cow got loose." "That's right," Sutter said softly. "Now folks'll tear each other apart over things they don't even understand. And half of it ain't even real, just stuff some internet goblin typed up in his mama's basement." Papaw nodded. "America's always been loud, but she used to be loud with purpose. Factories, trains, progress. Now she's loud with confusion, And that, boys, that makes me mad." They fell silent for a moment. Not a peaceful silence, a simmering one. The anger was real now, not performative, not humorous. The kind of anger that comes from loving something so hard you can't stand to see it wounded. TL finally broke the tension. "Well, I'll tell you what pisses me off is young folks think we're the problem." Virgil slapped the barn wall. Yes, they do. Like we started all this. Buddy, all I did was retire and drink water. That's my whole criminal record." Sutter raised a finger. "I put my shopping cart back every single time. Every single time. If that don't earn me citizenship, I don't know what does." Papaw chuckled despite himself. "Boys, anger's natural. Means you still give a damn." They waited. The barn hummed. The creek murmured. Something shifted in the air. The first hint of the deeper, heavier feelings lurking beneath the night's surface. Papaw took the bottle, held it up so the lamplight caught the amber. "Now look," he said, voice firm but warm. "Anger's part of the journey, but it ain't the destination. We love this country too much to leave her on a bad note." Virgil sighed. TL scratched his chin. Sutter leaned back in his chair. The anger, for now, had done its work. It had bled away the politeness. It had exposed the raw nerves. It had cleared the fog. And something softer, something like hope's shadow, was waiting just past the next pour.
Chapter 3. Bargaining. If America would just hold still a minute, we could fix her. The third pour is where the anger cooled enough to start thinking again. Not clearly, not yet, but with that particular brand of late-evening optimism that makes old men believe the world is still negotiable. Bargaining is a hopeful stage of grief. It's where men who've lived through wars, gas shortages, and disco decide that maybe, just maybe, the republic can be coaxed back into shape if everyone would just follow a few simple instructions. TL took the next sip, rolled it across his tongue like he was tasting the faults of civilization, and said, "I've been thinking, if America would just take one good nap, I mean a real nap, with snoring and drool, she'd wake up a whole lot more reasonable." Papaw nodded. "That's fair. Folks are cranky because they don't sleep. Country's running on fumes. Sleep deprivation will make a saint slap a nun." Virgil grunted. "We should have put America down for a nap back in 2010. Missed our window." Sutter, always the most practical, said, "Well, it ain't too late. Somebody just needs to dim the lights, turn off the TV, and give her a bowl of soup. That'll settle anybody." This was how bargaining began, with the belief that national healing required the same steps as comforting a sick dog. Papaw leaned over and rubbed his hands together. "Look here," he said. "We ain't that far gone. Folks just need a reminder of decency." "What kind of reminder?" TL asked. Papaw considered this. "Maybe we ought to bring back front porches." The group went silent, respectful. A front porch wasn't just a porch. It was a philosophy. "I'm serious," Papaw said. "Most of America's troubles come from the fact that nobody sits outside anymore. Used to be you knew your neighbors, you knew their dogs, you knew who hung their laundry out too long and who was stealing tomatoes out your garden. That was community," Sutter said softly. "Now we got garage doors that swallow people whole. They disappear like pellets in a Pac-Man machine." Virgil raised a finger. "You can't bargain with a country that ain't got porches. That's what I say." He wasn't wrong. Bargaining requires someone to bargain with. The whiskey meditated in their bloodstreams, smoothing the earlier roughness. The barn lights glowed warm, outlining dust particles drifting through the air like indecisive snowflakes. Outside, Brushy Creek hummed its slow water hymn. Papaw took another sip. "Boys," he said, "we could fix this country in 6 months if they'd just let us write the instructions." "6 months," Sutter said. "Try 6 weeks. 6 days, Virgil counted. Long weekend, tops. TL tapped the bottle. Okay then, what do we fix first? Papaw pointed a finger like a general marking maps. Step 1, politeness. Politeness, Virgil blinked. Politeness, Papaw repeated. Mandatory, nationwide. You get a ticket for interrupting people and triple fines for talking over old men. The others raised their glasses in solemn agreement. Sutter cleared his throat. Step 2, he announced. We reintroduce shame. Everyone murmured reverently. Not too much, he clarified. Just a healthy, functioning amount. Enough so folks think twice before acting like fools in the Walmart parking lot. Virgil snapped his fingers. Yes, shame used to be the traffic cop of society. Papaw nodded. That's exactly. Moderate shame. Controlled burn, like forestry. TL rubbed his temples. Boys, imagine how different America would be if folks felt even a pinch of embarrassment again. There'd be fewer arguments online, fewer grown adults throwing fits about cheese substitutions.
And a hell of a lot fewer pajama pants out in public, Virgil added. The quiet that followed wasn't solemn. It was hopeful. Step 3, Sutter said, warm it now. We bring back dinner invitations. This startled them. Dinner invitations? Papaw repeated, intrigued. Yes, sir, Sutter said. You invite folks you disagree with. Feed 'em. Make 'em pass the mashed potatoes across the aisle. There was a long, slow nodding of heads. A man can't maintain hatred while eating cornbread in another man's kitchen. Papaw's voice softened. I knew America wasn't done for, he said, as long as we still know how to pass dishes clockwise. They all chuckled. The bargaining deepened. Step 4, Virgil said, standing up and stretching his spine until it sounded like a nature documentary. We take everybody's damn phones at the table. That's right, put them in a basket by the door. Put a lid on it, TL added, a heavy lid. Make consequences. And step 5, Sutter said, we teach folks how to hush. A deep, satisfied silence fell. Hushing, real deliberate hushing, was the ancient wisdom of old Southern men. You hush, and you hear things, the creak, the wind, your own thoughts, maybe even somebody else's. Plus, it's peaceful. Hushing is peaceful. The whiskey made another lap through the group, leaving behind a warm trail of earnestness. Their bargaining now had the tone of instruction, not anger, not lament, but a good-natured diagnosis of a nation they still believed could be salvaged. Well, TL said finally, I think we could do it. I really do. America ain't hopeless. America's never been hopeless. She's just been, this indisciplined. Sutter laughed. Like a teenager with the car keys. Exactly, Papa said, pointing at him. You love 'em, you proud of 'em, but Lord help you if you check the gas tank. Virgil stretched his arms out wide. Boys, if we could just get this country to hold still for 5 minutes, we could straighten her right out. 5 minutes, that's all we need. Papa sighed, a warm, earnest sigh. America ain't past saving. She just needs a tune-up, and maybe somebody to sit with her while she figures out what kind of person she wants to be next. Outside, Brushy Creek murmured like it agreed. Or maybe it didn't. Hard to tell with creeks. But the bargaining had done its job. It had given them hope. It had laid a foundation. And somewhere, beyond the next pour, the sadness they'd been circling all night began to stir.
The fourth pour is the quiet one. The one that doesn't ask permission before it settles into the ribs. Anger cracks the door, bargaining props it open, but depression walks right in, sits down on the good chair, and doesn't bother taking off its boots. The barn felt stiller, heavier, like the air itself had remembered something sad. When Papaw tipped the bottle this time, nobody made a joke. Nobody cleared the throat. Nobody launched into a story about roundabouts or obscenely talkative appliances. Instead, they watched the whiskey fall into the glass like they were watching years slip through a funnel. TL took his sip first. He didn't make his usual face. He just stared at the dusty rafters and said,
You ever notice the world got faster than memory can keep up? Virgil didn't respond at first. He just exhaled. Slow, long, weary, like he had been holding that question behind his teeth for decades. Yep, he said. Feels like time used to walk. Now it sprints. Hell, I can't even remember what I had for lunch yesterday. That's age, Sutter muttered. No, Virgil said. It's the world. The whole world's running hot, overclocked, like a computer that's about to smoke. This statement didn't require agreement. Everyone in the barn felt it. That buzzing hum of a world pushed past its natural speed, the news cycles, the outrage cycles, the cycles of worry, fear, and exhaustion that had become the modern diet, the kind of emotional heaviness that settles in your bones and makes everything feel 2 shades too dim. Sutter set his glass down on the old cooler beside him. He said, I miss when people weren't so lonely. The others looked at him. Not surprised, just sad. That was the first real admission of the night. Back then, Sutter continued, you didn't have to make a plan to see anybody. They'd just show up. You'd hear a knock or a car on the gravel or somebody hollering from the porch. Now you got to schedule companionship like it's a dentist appointment. Papa nodded, slow and tired. Modern loneliness, he said, is loud. Folks surrounded by noise, but nobody's talking to 'em. The silence that followed wasn't the good kind. It wasn't reflective. It was heavy. TL rubbed the bridge of his nose. Boys, I don't reckon this country's the problem. I think maybe we're just old. Nobody argued. Depression doesn't leave room for debate. He went on. We've been watching the sun set on things we spent our whole lives calling normal. I ain't saying the world's worse now, just different. Smaller in some places, bigger in others. Familiar things disappearing and being replaced with, hell, I don't even know. Papa stared into his drink, like the answer might float to the top. I miss a lot of folks, he said softly. That one hit hard. Virgil swallowed. Yeah, me too. Sutter kept looking at the cooler. You think, he asked cautiously, that maybe we ain't really mad at America? Maybe we're just grieving? The word hung in the air like a lantern in fog. Papa sighed, long, deep, ancient. Could be, he said. Could be we're grieving all kinds of things. Friends, brothers, wives, places that don't exist anymore. Versions of ourselves we ain't seen in 50 years. TL's eyes softened. God, I miss my brother. None of them spoke. They let him sit with it. Let the barn creak. Let Brushy Creek whisper in the dark. Depression is slow. It demands space. Virgil rubbed his eyes with the heel of his palm. He said, all my life, I thought being old meant being wise. Nobody ever told me it also meant feeling like a museum of people who ain't here anymore.
Papa placed his hand on the arm of his chair and stared at his own knuckles. They were swollen, bent, marked by decades of tools and work. I think getting older, he said, ain't about losing strength. It's about losing witnesses. The barn went silent again, but this time the silence had meaning. It wasn't empty. It was full of echoes. The men shifted, not uncomfortably, but tenderly, like they were adjusting to the weight of memories suddenly made heavier by the whiskey. Sutter cleared his throat. I miss the days, he said, when mistakes didn't get broadcast to the whole world, when you could be wrong in private, when you could learn without being shamed. Back then, Papa said, people forgave each other, or at least forgot faster. Virgil leaned forward. Now everybody's carrying grief like it's luggage they got to show at the airport. That's what this whole country feels like. A bunch of tired folks dragging emotional baggage through a terminal with nowhere to sit. Papa nodded. People are worn out, he said. America's tired. We're tired. No one contradicted him. They all felt it.
that bottom-of-the-glass heaviness that comes not from drinking, but from remembering. Outside, the night thickened until the barn felt like a small, fragile island floating on a dark sea. TL raised his glass halfway, then lowered it again. "I think what scares me most," he admitted, "is that I don't recognize the world anymore." Papa shook his head. "You don't have to recognize it," he said gently. "You just gotta love the people in it." This landed with a softness the others weren't prepared for. Virgil looked at Papa. "You think we can still do that, with everything being so new, so loud?" Papa shrugged. "Love ain't ever been about understanding. It's about staying. Staying when it's messy, staying when it hurts, staying when the world's turning into something you never rehearsed." Sutter wiped his nose. "I didn't know getting old would feel like this." Papa smiled sadly. "Neither did I." The creek murmured. The lamplight flickered. Somewhere outside, a lone owl called into the darkness, a sound as old as sorrow itself. "I guess," TL said softly, "we ain't what we were." Papa nodded. "Maybe not, and maybe we never were." They let that truth settle. Quiet, fragile, shaped like acceptance, but not quite there. The whiskey bottle stood nearly half empty now. And beyond the sorrow, beyond the ache, something new was beginning to stir, faint but present. They weren't done yet, not with the night, not with each other, not with the country. But before anything else could rise, the fourth pour had done its work.
Chapter 5. Acceptance. We're still here, and America still knows our names. The fifth pour was different. Not loud, not soft, but settled. Acceptance doesn't arrive like lightning or grief. It shows up the way dawn does. Slowly at first, then all at once, revealing things you weren't sure you were ready to see. Papa poured the next round with a steady hand. The whiskey shone gold in the lamplight, reflecting off the dust motes drifting like tiny lanterns in the air. The barn felt warmer somehow, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. Brushy Creek outside kept murmuring its slow, ancient hymn, reminding them that water remembers its path even when men do not. Virgil raised his glass. "Well," he said, "I reckon we can't do nothing about it." Nobody argued. Acceptance begins with that admission, not defeat, but recognition. TL nodded, slow and thoughtful. "World done changed, and we changed too. Maybe we didn't notice when it happened. Maybe we didn't want to." Sutter ran a thumb along the rim of his cup. "I guess that's part of it. Expectation, the idea that tomorrow's supposed to resemble yesterday. But it never has. Not really." Papa leaned back and sighed. Not a tired sigh, a peaceful one. "Boys, I think this is how it goes. You spend the first half of your life trying to change the world, and the second half trying to understand the one you got." They nodded. This made perfect sense. The anger had drained out of them. So had the bargaining. The sadness still lingered, but it no longer felt like something sharp, more like a weight resting gently on the table, acknowledged and allowed. Sutter was the first to shift toward optimism. "You know, we're always talking like the country's fallen apart, but it isn't. Not really. It's just stretching, growing pains, folks figuring out who they want to be next." "That's right," Papo said. "America's always reinvented itself. That's her whole trick. That's her talent. She ain't a statue. She's a river. A fast one, a noisy one, a stubborn one," Papo said, smiling. "Just like us." There was something healing in that. The idea that America wasn't out of control, but simply changing speeds, adjusting course, maybe even improving in ways they couldn't see clearly from the vantage point of 80-plus years. Virgil rubbed his jaw. "I'll tell you what, kids today, They ain't bad. They're different, sure, but they're smart, they're tough, they're dealing with things we never had to think about. Damn right, TL said. We didn't have to grow up with the whole world watching us. We didn't have to get compared to strangers every 15 minutes. We didn't have to live inside a digital fishbowl. Sutter shook his head. No wonder they're tired. Hell, I'm tired. Yet somehow, Papa said, they keep showing up, keep trying, keep making things. They got a spark in them. And ideas. Some crazy, some brilliant, some both. Crazy and brilliant is how America got started, Papa reminded them. This earned a round of soft laughter. Acceptance had arrived fully now, not the passive kind, but the kind that makes room for humility and generosity. I think we've been too hard on the world, and too hard on ourselves. TL nodded slowly. We always talked like we were leaving something better for our kids, but maybe they're the ones leaving something better for us. How you figure? Virgil asked. Well, TL said, look at them. They're asking questions we never asked. They're learning to see each other. They're trying to build a world where folks can breathe easier. That's true, Sutter said. Young folks ain't afraid to talk about things we buried. That's courage. We didn't call it that when we were young. We called it trouble. But courage is courage. The barn grew quiet again. But this time it was a kindness, not a weight.
Papa studied the bottle for a long moment before speaking. I'll tell y'all something, he said. I used to think America was something we inherited, something fixed, something carved in stone. But that ain't right. He tapped his chest. It's something we maintain. Sutter sat up. Like a farm? Like a farm, Papa said. You tend the soil, pull weeds, mend fences, plant new things. Some seasons are harder than others. Some crops fail, some flourish. But you keep showing up. You keep working. You keep loving it, even when it's unlovable. Virgil stared into his drink and smiled softly. Well, he said, that sounds like America to me. Papa pointed at him, because that is America. She ain't perfect, never was, but she's ours, and she's still worth showing up for. TL raised his glass. To showing up. The others echoed him, lifting their cups toward the rafters. Sutter cleared his throat. You know, he said, I don't think the country's done for. I think she's just recalibrating. Virgil laughed. Didn't you make fun of me for saying that earlier? That was before the whiskey got profound, Sutter replied. The laugh that followed was warm, not rowdy, not bitter, not forced. Warm like a porch light left on for someone who's late coming home. Papa looked at the creek through the open barn window. America's been through worse, he said. She'll stand, might wobble, might creak, might holler now and then, but she'll stand. TL leaned back. And so will we. And so will they, Sutter added, the ones coming up. Papa smiled. America ain't done, not by a long shot, and neither are we. Outside, Brushy Creek murmured its agreement. Acceptance wasn't surrender. It wasn't resignation. It was clarity. And clarity had set the stage, quietly, firmly, for what came next.
Chapter 6. Reconciliation. Maybe the nature of things is changed. Maybe we change it back. Acceptance arrives like dawn. Reconciliation arrives like mid-morning, steady, honest, and unafraid to show the dust on the floorboards. The sixth pour slipped out of the Brushy Creek Reserve bottle with the confidence of a spirit that had waited 23 years for this exact hour. The barn had settled into a quiet warmth. The night outside hummed a low, patient tune. Papa lifted his glass, studied it with reverence, and said, "Boys, I think we done circled the mountain. Time to see what's on the other side." Reconciliation, unlike bargaining, doesn't fantasize about fixing the whole world by Tuesday. It's not a negotiation. It's an audit. A gentle but unblinking look at the past, the present, and the ordinary grace in between. Virgil rolled his shoulders. "I've been thinking about what we said, about kids being different, about the world being louder, about us feeling lost sometimes." He paused and squinted into the lamplight. "Truth is, I'm proud of 'em." The others blinked, surprised by the direction. "I am. These young folks, they're standing up for things. They're speaking out. They're figuring out how to be better humans. Hell, they've had to learn faster than we did, and they're doing it under floodlights instead of candles." Papa nodded. He said, "They inherited a complicated world, and they're trying to uncomplicate what they can." TL leaned forward. "I wasn't fair to 'em earlier. Spent too much time shaking my head at their choices, not enough time appreciating their courage." Sutter sighed. "We didn't exactly make it easy for 'em. Left 'em a whole lot of work." "Every generation does," Pawpaw replied softly, "but ours also gave 'em tools, knowledge, freedom to question, and they're using them. That matters." The barn creaked in agreement, or maybe it was just shifting from the cool night air. Sutter took a sip, thoughtful. He said, "I've been wrong about one thing. I thought the country was falling apart, but maybe it's just falling into place differently than we expected." There was something powerful in hearing that from a man who had spent 40 years declaring the opposite. Papa smiled, a tired but honest smile. He said, "Boys, things ain't supposed to stay the same. If they did, we'd still be churning butter and dying at 40 from a tooth infection." TL laughed, low and warm. "Hell, Pop, you ain't dying from nothing except stubbornness." "Exactly, and that's my point. Stubbornness is good until it turns into paralysis." The men nodded. They knew that truth intimately. Reconciliation grew deeper. "I've been too harsh on this country, too quick to complain, too slow to understand. I look at all these different folks trying their best in a loud, complicated world, and I think, well, maybe they're not the problem. Maybe they're the proof the nation's still alive." Sutter looked at him with quiet agreement. He said, "People care. They care so much they can't help but argue about everything. That's not collapse. That's engagement." Pawpaw lifted his glass. "Boys, you know what reconciliation really is?" They waited. "It's forgiving the world for not staying young with you." The barn fell quiet. Not heavy quiet this time, but gentle. That kind of quiet that settles in when truth fits just right. TL swallowed hard. He said, "I've been carrying a grudge against time, against change, against folks I didn't understand. But the truth is, they ain't doing nothing we didn't do. They're just doing it with better technology." Virgil nodded. "We thought payphones were the future. They got holograms on their desk." Sutter chuckled. "We thought microwaves were witchcraft. Now we got cars that drive themselves, sometimes straight into ditches, but still." Pawpaw grinned. Progress ain't a straight line. It's a drunk walk. It stumbles, it sways.
Reconciliation wasn't just about accepting youth or forgiving modernity. It was about forgiving themselves. We weren't perfect, Papaw said. We tried, we failed, we learned, we tried again. Same thing folks are doing now. That's right, Virgil said. Sometimes I think we're too nostalgic for a past that didn't exist. You mean the good old days? TL asked. Papaw shook his head. Most of the good old days were things we remember better than they were. That's nostalgia's trick. It uses soft lighting. They let that truth settle like dust on a hay bale. Sutter broke the silence next. We talk like America's some fragile thing, but she's tough. Always has been. She bends, but she don't break. Like a cane pole. Like a stubborn child. Like an old man who refuses to stop living, TL said. Papaw raised his glass. Boys, maybe the nature of things has changed, and maybe we need to change it again. Not with anger, not with fear, but with care, with decency, with patience. Kaizen, Sutter said suddenly. The others blanked. What? Virgil asked. Kaizen, he repeated. Little improvements, steady ones. You keep nudging things better. One porch, one meal, one conversation at a time. Papaw smiled. Well, look at that. The whiskey made philosophers out of us. They all laughed again. Reconciliation had fully arrived, not just in their words, but in their posture, their tone, their willingness to see the world as something still worth sculpting. Papaw leaned back. America ain't perfect, he said, but she's ours, and she's still hungry for good people who don't walk away when it gets rough. TL lifted his glass. To not walking away. Virgil lifted his. To standing up. Sutter added, to steady improvements. Papaw raised his last. To the future. However odd, loud, or bewildering it gets, we'll meet it. Outside, Brushy Creek murmured. The barn breathed. The night leaned in, listening. Reconciliation was done. The truth had been spoken. And all that remained now was the final quiet promise of resolve.
Chapter 7. Resolve. We ain't leaving. We ain't quitting. Not our style. By the time the 7 pour came around, the night had settled into that deep, velvet stillness that only exists in rural Arkansas after Thanksgiving, when the cold hangs low, the stars lean close, and Brushy Creek whispers like it knows ancient secrets. The barn was warm from lamplight and conversation, and the bottle of Brushy Creek Reserve had reached the level where even the whiskey seemed reflective. Papaw held the bottle long enough for the men to notice. Boys, he said softly, this is the last round. Nobody protested. Last rounds aren't about quantity. They're about ceremony. He poured slowly, evenly, with a reverence that felt almost like prayer. The glasses glowed amber. The barn felt sacred, not in a churchy way, but in a lived-in, honest way, the way a place feels sacred when it's been the backdrop for a lifetime of breathing, working, laughing, reconciling. Virgil lifted his glass first. Well, he said, I reckon we've reached the truth. Sutter snorted. Lord help us if this is the truth. But it was. This was the point in the night, in the grief cycle, in the conversation, in the life of a country where all the noise and nostalgia had burned off, leaving only what mattered. Papaw raised his glass. To staying, he said simply. The others raised theirs in silent agreement, because that really was what it came down to. They sipped together, slow and thoughtful. The whiskey tasted different now, gentler, rounder, like the bitterness had aged out of it.
TL leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He said, "You know, I've been thinking all night about how everything shifts. The country, the world, us. But something just hit me." "What's that?" Sutter asked. "We're still here." The simplicity of it landed like a hammer. Virgil nodded. "We're still here," he repeated. "We've seen things come and go, leaders rise and fall, fads flare up and burn out. But we're still here." Papaw chuckled. "Nothing can kill stubbornness and good genetics." TL kept going. "We ain't quitters. Never have been. Never will be. And if the country's in a rough patch, hell, so what? We've lived through rough patches before." "More than a few," Sutter said. "Remember the 70s? Lord have mercy." "Yeah, we thought polyester was going to end civilization," Virgil said. They laughed. Tired, genuine laughter. That laughter was resolve in its purest form. Papaw looked toward the barn door, cracked open just enough to see the sliver of night sky. "America's like a family," he said quietly. "Sometimes you don't like how she acts. Sometimes she gets on your nerves. Sometimes she disappoints the ever-loving daylights out of you." Virgil nodded. "Sometimes she's just downright embarrassing." TL added, "Sometimes she needs to go to bed early." "But," Papaw continued, "you don't quit on family. You don't walk away. You don't leave her to figure it all out alone. You love her anyway, and you try again tomorrow." There it was. The lesson, the philosophy, the oath.
And besides, Sutter added, America's made of people, regular people, and regular people know how to mend things. Always have. Papaw smiled. "That's right. Somebody'll patch the roof. Somebody'll fix the fence. Somebody'll paint the porch. There's always folks doing the quiet work." "And the loud work," Virgil said. "Somebody's got to yell at the county commissioners." TL raised his glass. "And somebody's got to show up for the kids. Teach 'em how to shake hands and mean it." Sutter pointed at Papaw. "And somebody's got to keep wisdom in circulation, 'cause the world's running low." Papaw waved him off, though he was clearly warmed by the sentiment. "We all carry wisdom," he said. "We just carry it in different pockets." There was a long, comfortable pause. The creek whispered, the barn beams groaned, a cold wind rubbed the tin siding but didn't get inside. Resolve settled on the men like a blanket. Not heavy, just present. "You know what I think?" Virgil said suddenly. "I think America ain't in danger of dying. I think she's in danger of forgetting how tough she is." Papaw nodded slowly. "That's fair. She's been through worse. Civil wars, depressions, pandemics, politics that'd make a mule kick a preacher." "And she's still standing," Sutter said. "Still loud, still messy, still stubborn." "Just like us," TL added. The men clinked their glasses together. Not hard, not loud, but with purpose. Papaw took a deep breath. "Boys, we've lived long enough to see the world turn over a few times, and if I've learned anything, it's this. Hope don't vanish. It gets quiet, but it don't vanish." Virgil wiped his eyes discreetly. "We ain't done," he said. Sutter sat up straighter. "Not even close." TL grinned. "Hell, we got maybe 20 more good years. 10 functional years, 5 athletic years, 1 dancing year, and about 6 minutes of peak speed left." They all laughed so hard the barn echoed. Papaw raised his glass one last time. "To America," he said. "May she wobble, but not fall. May she fuss, but not fail. May she stay loud, proud, messy, and free. And may we stay with her, not as critics or quitters, but as caretakers." The men toasted. The whiskey burned warm and clean. Outside, Brushy Creek kept its steady rhythm. The stars blinked like old porch bulbs. The cold wind hung on the other side of the barn door, but inside there was only warmth. Resolve didn't roar. It didn't march. It didn't preach. It simply stayed. The men breathed deep, looked at each other, and knew the truth. They weren't done, and neither was America. The bottle, empty now, glimmered in the lamplight, a quiet witness to a promise sealed on a cold Arkansas night. A promise that sounded a lot like faith. A promise that felt a lot like love. A promise that would carry them and the country into whatever came next.
Epilogue. The Critters in the Shadows. A cooter Gothic closing by the ones who were listening. Long after the old men's voices softened into low murmurs, long after the final scrape of chair legs on barn planks, and long after the brushy creek reserve had given its last warm whisper to the night, 3 small figures stirred in the dimmest corner of the barn. They had been there the whole time, quiet, respectful, trying not to sneeze or cluck or bray at the wrong moment. General Beauregard, chest puffed but eyes thoughtful. Bronky the donkey, ears dropped in concentration. Okra, who might be a pig or might be something deeper, blinking slow, absorbing every word. The barn felt bigger now that the voices had settled, like the stories themselves were still hanging in the rafters, drifting down like dust. Bronky let out a long breath, one of his thoughtful donkey sighs, the kind meant for serious occasions or mild confusion. "Well," he said softly, "that was something, wasn't it?" General Beauregard hopped up onto a feed bag, his tiny spurs clicking. It was history, real history, not the kind in school books, the kind you only get when old men tell the truth by accident. Okra nodded. They've lived so much. They've seen so much. Sounds like the whole world done turned over twice on 'em. Bronky scratched behind his ear with a slow hoof. They're worried, but they still believe in things. You hear that? They still believe. "Oh, they believe all right," Beauregard said. "Believe in America. Believe in decency. Believe in sticking around even when the porch light flickers." The rooster stared through the crack in the barn door at the wide Arkansas night. The stars looked cold, but the world beneath them felt warm. "It's strange," Okra whispered. "Hearing humans get soft like that. Makes you feel things, deep things, like maybe this place ain't just a farm, or a town, or a barn. Maybe it's all part of one big story." Bronky nodded. "Stories is how folks stay alive even when they're gone." Beauregard fluffed his feathers. "Precisely. A rooster knows these things." They sat together for a long moment, listening to the distant creek, the owls, the tiny creaks of a barn settling into sleep. "I liked what Papa said about staying, about not quitting, about taking care of things even when they look messy." Bronky flicked his tail. "Makes sense. This barn ain't perfect. This farm ain't perfect. Nothing's perfect. But that don't mean you walk off into the woods and give up."
Beauregard straightened his posture. "Exactly. A true citizen, whether man or rooster, stands his ground, even when the ground is muddy or morally ambiguous." Okra blinked. "Morally what now?" "Don't worry about it," Beauregard said. "It just sounded philosophical." Bronky let the words settle. "You reckon America hears any of this?" he asked quietly. Okra shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. But those old fellers said it anyway. That counts." Beauregard nodded. "Words have wings. Sometimes they fly farther than you think." The night pressed soft against the boards. A cold breeze wiggled in and brushed against Bronky's mane. He shivered, but not from the chill. "They still love this place," he said. "Even after all the years, all the changes, they still love it." "Love's stubborn, like us," Beauregard said. "Speak for yourself. I am a picture of grace." Okra snorted.
The rooster rolled his eyes. "You squeal when startled." "It's a delicate squeal," Ochre protested. Bronchi muttered, "Focus, y'all." They quieted again. Somewhere out in the night a coyote called. Not close, not threatening, just acknowledging its own existence under the same moon. Beauregard lowered his voice. "They ain't wrong, you know, about the world changing, about things moving too fast, but they ain't wrong about the good in people neither." Ochre nodded. "Seems like the trick is to keep going. Little steps, big heart." Bronchi's voice softened. "Kaizen," he said, proud he remembered it. "That's what Sutter called it." Beauregard hopped down from the feed bag. "Well then," he said, puffing out his chest like a general delivering his final orders, "we shall adopt the principle of Kaizen." Ochre smirked. "Can critters do that?" "Of course," Beauregard said. "We'll just do it quieter and with snacks." Bronchi took a deep breath. "So what now?" The rooster walked to the barn door and looked out into the night, the fields, the trees, the endless dark stitched with stars. "Now," Beauregard said, "we go into the world. We walk the land. We keep watch. We take care of what's ours, and we stay." Ochre's voice softened. "Staying seemed like the whole point." Bronchi nodded. "Humans stay. Critters stay. America stays, even when she stumbles." Beauregard cleared his throat dramatically. "Then let it be known, on this night after Thanksgiving, with Brushy Creek whispering and the barn dreaming and the old men speaking truth, we too pledge ourselves to the cause." "What cause?" Ochre asked. "Decency, spirit, freedom, and the occasional snack." Bronchi smiled. "A good pledge." Ochre added, "Let's walk a while. Let the night cool us off." So they stepped quietly out of the barn, three small silhouettes under the wide Arkansas sky, their steps soft, their hearts steady, their resolve simple. Stay, listen, care, and try again tomorrow. Behind them, the barn exhaled. Ahead of them, the world waited. The story closed itself with a gentle thump, and the critters walked on into the night.